You are listening to the Armenian Radio Hour of New Jersey on 89.5 FM, and on the phone with us is Mr. Aris Janigian, and I believe he is contacting us from Los Angeles. Aris, how are you?
Hello, thank you for having me. Yes, I'm in my office in Los Angeles.
Excellent. Aris, thank you for joining us. I just read your bio just prior to having you connect with you on the air. Tell us a little bit about your background and specifically how you ended up in Los Angeles.
I'm a Fresno Armenian. Grew up in little Armenia town, just a couple of blocks away from William Saroyan's house. And so I grew up in that part of town. My father was a farmer, and when I reached college age, I moved to Southern California and have been here ever since. And I've been in Los Angeles for about 22, 23 years.
Growing up in Fresno, we know that as that's kind of little Armenia town. We just interviewed Nancy Krikorian. I know you were aware of that, and she grew up on what I consider the East Coast's little Armenia, which is Watertown. So that's interesting. Aris, the book, it's called The Angelic Land. It uses the famous LA riots. A lot of our listeners are old enough to have remembered that. I mean, it was only 20 years ago. As a backdrop for most of the story, how much firsthand experience did you have in describing what was going on during that time?
I was living in a neighborhood called Mid-Wilshire, which is in the heart of Los Angeles. And though the riots started in south central Los Angeles, about maybe 6 miles away, by they started in the afternoon of the 30th. By the morning of the 31st, it had spread into our neighborhoods. So I was really very much in the heart of what turned out to be the most destructive social upheaval in American history.
The book itself, it has an ethnic Armenian character. His name is Adam Derderian, who is placed in this non-Armenian cultural landscape, being L.A. and the L.A. riots. For you, how hard was it to piece together the Armenian aspect of the story while the background is American culture?
Well, I think that actually it's a very rich, I won't say easy, but a very rich piecing together or weaving in. My character is from Lebanon. He is an exile of the Lebanese Civil War. He comes to America when he's 10. And 20 years or so later, he's faced with another social, what you might even call a civil war in America. So there are very rich parallels between his past life and his experiences going through the riots. I also want to stress that, the book is it's a book about the American experience. Obviously, I have an Armenian with the genocide as a, cultural backdrop, and the Lebanese Civil War is a more proximal cultural backdrop. But it's really about, how identity is forged in a place with so many challenges, and that the forging of that identity is, I think, speaks to the essential American experience. So it wasn't as difficult as one might think, but of course full of its own challenges.
You referenced, there are obviously a lot of challenges. LA itself, a lot of us view as, also a very Armenian kind of populated area, Glendale, the surrounding areas. But for somebody who's not living there, may not feel that connection to the backdrop. Are there connections to the struggles that Armenians have faced, similar to the rioting that took place and what was going on, what you're describing?
Yeah, I think so. I think that the Armenians, have been, for nearly 100 years in a state of permanent exile and wandering and digging up and rooting into another place. So I think this experience is, part of the reason I chose the main character is because it represents the American experience from our earliest times. So I think that, like any, ambitious literary novel, it's up to the reader to find those connections to their own lives. I mean, all novels are written in very particular settings with particular characters. But I think there's a lot that echoes our experience as a people, in the particular circumstances.
Your previous two books, and I did some research. If I read it correctly, they were about farmers in Fresno. Is that correct? Bloodvine and
That's
Riverbig.
Correct.
And I read also that you had started writing about the riots. This was a long time ago, I guess post riots, 20 years ago, and then you kind of had a lull in between, and then you picked it up recently again. What caused you to pick it up, and what was the motivation behind that? And I mean, this is kind of a jump from two books about farmers.
Yeah, it really is. In fact, one of the reviews of my book said it was quite an unexpected leap for me literarily. I was, settings in Fresno, early 60s, late 1950s, all the way to the current times. Well, I knew the 20th anniversary of the riots was coming up. I didn't think there was much written about it, which was very curious to me, since it was a massive social upheaval. And I had lived through it, and it had been in the back of my mind to write a book about it. And I felt that, given the anniversary, that it was a good time to take the subject up. But the book is extremely ambitious and has a lot of, I think, technical daring in it. I felt I probably needed time to mature as a novelist to be able to take this very, difficult subject up. There's a lot of racial issues, and there's a lot of challenges to writing about race riots as a white narrator and white writer.
I mean, has the book's been out? Has there been any? I'm going to say, has there not been any negative feedback? I mean, you really, I think, are the first one to address the riots, if I'm correct, in novel form or in print 20 years post-rioting. And has there been any reaction from the Armenian community relating to how you've weaved it together?
The book, I think it's the first novel-length book to take the riots on in a head-on way, in a very direct way. There have been maybe 2-3 other books that have kind of skirted around it or used it as a backdrop, but not in the way that I have. The reaction to the Armenian community has been very muted. I would say they've shown quite little interest in the subject. We have a population of probably maybe 100,000 Lebanese Armenians in LA. And I can't imagine I've sold more than 50 to 100 copies to those people. So they've had very little interest in the topic, to be perfectly frank. And most of the interest is from non-Armenians, which is the case with most of my books, actually.
Aris, I asked this question to Nancy, and I'm interested in getting your opinion too. What can we as a community do to support new authors? I'm not sure if many of our listeners have picked up copies of your books or that have even heard of you, and that's not to be disrespectful, but is enough being done? I mean, you're on the West Coast, but you were just here recently on Tuesday, March 12th. You did something at Columbia University. What do we need to do in order to encourage support, to create support for our authors?
Well, I thank you for that question, because it is an important question. In fact, in some ways, the future of... Are you still there? I feel like...
Yes, I'm still here, yes.
Yeah. I think the future of our, writers depends upon the Armenian community getting in front of the sales. Because once we begin to show interest in our own stories, then the sales increase and the publicity increases. And then the editors and publishers take notice, and they begin to publish more of those books. And our story gets out there. So we need to do one very simple thing. We need to pick up, copies of the book and show sale. and support. I was fortunate to come out to City University, and then I was at Nassar, and then Columbia, and a tour back east. Incredible support and generosity, but we need more of that. We just need people to purchase the books, and hopefully read them, but also to purchase books that are not just genocide stories. I know the Armenians really get behind stories about the genocide, but this is post-genocidal literature. It's about our world in the diaspora after that. And so I think it's important that story be conveyed and supported in our community.
Aris, on that strand, I'm going to continue. Where can readers pick up a copy of your book? Online? Is there an e-version of it?
There is an e-version of it. The best place right now, bookstores are so traumatized that the best way to purchase any book, I think now, is just to go to Amazon. Amazon itself carries it, and then there's a number of dealers, like 10 dealers who carry it on Amazon site. So it's just go to Amazon or go to your local bookstore and have them order if they don't already have it. And, just pass the word along. Say, hey, this guy's written a book. Let's get behind it.
Aris, anything else you'd like to say before we close?
Well, I'd just like to thank you for taking the time to interview me, and I thank your readers for listening in, and I hope they can get behind our books and show the American community that our stories matter to us, first and foremost.
Aris Janigian, we thank you for joining us. The new novel is This Angelic Land, available online for sure on Amazon.com, and any local bookstore, I'm sure, can order it. We thank you for joining us. Good luck.
Thank you so much.